So in this small lecture, we shall have the Damiano defense, which comes up with the following position. So we shall have the knights in the center. This is an interesting line where in just 3 moves, we have these 2 knights in the center of the game. So let's see how this happens, and we shall have the most common, we shall start with the most common blunder that happens from black. When white plays the most common move, which is e4, and black responds with the most common move, which is e5. So white continues with knight f3, and at this point, please remember that the most common moves are knight c6 and d6. But at this point, we shall go with a line which is very important to remember, knight f6. Of course, we can see that we shall lose this pawn, and at this point, we shall also take their pawn. So this is the position that we saw at the beginning. This is the position that you expect to come into in the Damiano systems. So at this point, we see that white always attacks the knight in the center, and if black doesn't respond with the black knight, the black queen coming to the center, most times falling back or retreating the knight just brings disaster with an attack on the queen. So white attacks the queen, and this literally gets black into trouble because you have to lose the queen. The king is in danger, and black cannot save the queen at this point. So this is the most common trap in the Damiano defense. So this, always remember, this has the Damiano blunder. So having seen the blunder, let's see what black has to play to go through this opening. So the move starts with e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6. And at this point, white usually and always takes this pawn. But of course not always. But most times always takes that pawn. And black then takes also back in the center. So we see that the white queen comes out as usual to always take that knight. At this point, we play the standard line and the safer line, which is the queen to e7. And when white takes black's knight, this is when we have to attack the knight. Attacking the knight, you have to always respond. We have always expect these common responses. You have to always expect these common responses, which is the bishops and the knight and the pawns. But let's start with the most common response, which is the pawn, which is the pawn to d4. So at this point, we can see that white is trying to save the knight, but of course black has to take back the piece. And then we have the most common branches at this point. This is the part you should remember in this lecture, whether white takes with a queen or white takes with a pawn. So let's see what happens. If white takes with a pawn, which is the main line, please always bring out your pieces. The reason is that you want also to clear this side and castle, and also take back your pawn. So having said that, please also note that white has these 3 common moves. Let's first see the first one, which is usually the most common one. They pin the knight so that the knight cannot take the pawn. It's important to unpin the knight, and then white usually castles, and also you can also castle back with black. At this point, usually white wants to hold on to the pawn, but holding onto the pawn is no problem. There's no problem here with holding onto the pawn. Taking back the pawn, we can see that white expects that they are really going to win the piece, but please use the rook. They cannot touch the knight. Please know that taking the knight is just disastrous for white, as they will be checkmated with the back rank checkmate. So please always note that. So let's go back to the other common system. What happens if they don't pin the knight? Sometimes they defend the pawn, which is an annoying system. Defending the pawn, you just bring out your bishop and get ready to castle and checkmate them with the rook and bishop. Please don't mind about the h3 pawn. Your queen will always fall onto h4, and the game will be quite better for black. But what if they try to exchange off the bishops? Trying to exchange off the bishops, we can say that just take the bishop, dismantle the center with these pawns, and this can be a standard game for black. Castle at this moment with the king in that position, and this will be with all the threats on the queen side. This is a beautiful game for black. It's an open game for black. So let's see what happens. Another system. What happens if they don't play f4? We've seen them play the bishop to b5. We've seen them play the pawn to f4. Then what happens if they play this bishop? What if they play the bishop still to f4, trying to hold on to the pawn? This is a system I've found myself winning a couple of games, of course, against amateurs and beginners who try to hold on to the pawn, just attack the bishop. Most of them, of course, often fall back into the bad position, trying to hold on to the pawn, taking the bishop to g3. Trying to hold on the pawn just spells disaster. Please note that there's no impassat move. It will just bring the queen into trouble. So you can note that this bishop will soon be trapped. Of course, white still tries to fight back by having this exchange, and black can continue following up with the exchanging of the pieces and winning the game comfortably. So those are the common systems that happen in such positions. So let's see what happens if another line. What happens if white takes with the queen? This is the line that I promised you that white tries to take with the queen. Of course, avoiding the main line, but this is also weaker than the main line of taking with the pawn. Taking with the pawn is usually better than taking with the queen. Taking with the queen just gets the pawn into the center, which is usually hard for white to hold on to this pawn. And then we can say that the bishop comes out to strike on the c pawn, and if white tries to hold on to everything, the knight still comes out to really put much pressure on these pawns. Trying to defend these pawns, just still too much pressure rises in the center, and literally white cannot hold on to the pawn, as we can see. So let's see another line which happens a lot. What if they defend it with the f pawn instead of the common d4 pawn? They defend with the f pawn, and this time we can see that we can take the knight. And if they always try to hold on to this pawn with the queen. So it's important to just dismantle those the center pawns with challenging them with the f pawn, and that pawn, when it remains alone, is literally very hard to defend. This is one of the lines when we try to exchange of the queens and literally put much pressure on the c pawn. So this system opens up the other bishop to take the knight, which is trying to defend, and we can say that these scattered pawns are not a very nice thing for white. It's a very playable game for black, and this line literally so much gives an advantage for those who are aggressive players, those who know how to attack the scattered pawns and giving white a bad game with their pawn advantage. So feel free to enjoy such lines. So let's go for this system also. Let's see the Damiano once again, and they take the pawn and we take their pawn, and this time they try not to fall into the traps we've just explained. not bring out their queen. They want to castle early and enjoy the game. So we have this bishop coming out. Always strike that bishop in the center. When it falls back, then we go for this standard line. When the queen just puts, it's literally a trap in the Damiano, which white easily falls into. We strike the pawn on G2 and also strike the pawn on E5. So this is literally a very important moment when we attack these two pieces with the queen from the center. So when they castle, which usually is the common move and the better option, we can see that we can take the knight in the center. When they try to attack the knight, this can be exchanged off, and literally black is already winning this game with these pins and very nice strikes. And lastly, let's have the other systems that can arise, which are very standard systems here, which we see that white doesn't do anything but plays normally in the center. We can continue with the common moves. You can expect them to take, but whatever happens, this is the very standard system which usually happens in such games. And black can play on with the standard systems, which you can go in detail. This was intended to be a small lecture, so that we don't go into detail with the many lines here. What happens if they take? If they take, you can take, and then you have a very standard game, which also gives black a good position. This is more of an equal game. We cannot say that anyone can claim an advantage at this point, but this is a game to enjoy, and this is a system to always remember. Please enjoy the Damiano defense, and looking forward for the next openings as we cover most of the openings in chess. Cheers.